Remix. 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 Remix.
You on mute. I mix what I like.
Oh my God! Now I'm doing all the rookie mistakes. Look, welcome everybody. It's the Remix Morning Show. Ear Doctor's not here. Amber's here. Geechee's here. Jared's here. Kamal might show up at 9 o'clock. We got Nick Estes showing up to have a real discussion. So it's going to get increasingly more serious as the morning goes. But welcome, comrades. Good to see you. Amber off the bench with the quickness. It's good to see you.
Always keep a 2.8.
Stay ready. You don't have to get ready.
Exactly. So, we know who wasn't ready as a mixer. You ain't mix what you like this morning, brother.
Who, me?
Yeah, I thought you was a DJ. I thought you had old DJ skills.
No, I'm fresh back, rushing back from taking baby girl to PT and getting my old man walk around the lake.
What's PT?
Physical therapy. Sorry, my daughter's recovering from her knee surgery, and she got physical therapy in the morning before school. And while she's in there, I did my old people lake walk. It was me and just the elders out there this morning. No young people out there today.
He said,
"Me I don't work out inside when it's cold outside. Like I only do inside workouts. I rarely would go outside because I'm scared to get sick. So."
Well, you have to be at least over 50. That's what I think it is. Nobody under 50 is outside. It was old people only. Yeah, and okay, fine, Geech. I'll put myself in there. I don't need to distinguish. I'm not mad.
He said,
Claudia said you are an elder.
It's okay to be old.
Hey, Amber, you didn't catch that? He was like, me and the elders.
Me and the elders. It was me and them.
Because I'm not one of them.
I will say I felt young today. I was the youngest one out there, though. I was at least the youngest out there today. It was strictly for real old people out there today.
And we really only knew he was old because of the gray in the beard.
If it was
black, he wouldn't even know for real.
See what I'm saying? Good recovery.
When you said PT, I actually was thinking about the military. I was like, what?
Yeah, and I was like, his kid not that old.
Yeah, it wouldn't be allowed. Exactly. Exactly. And like who said it this way? Who was I talking to? Oh, my homeboy says it this way over their dead body, not mine. You
about to bury your kid for their aspirations.
Nah, not the kid. The people who would sign him up.
Oh,
yeah. It ain't nobody. No. So how you all feeling? Remixers, please welcome as you all come on in. Please like, share, subscribe, do all the things to support the platform. And yeah. What else? How you all doing? What else is going on? What's the latest?
I went to a holiday party last night. I was trying out all my flirtuations on people. It was going great, but everybody named Daddy was in there. So I was just throwing out pickup lines to see what catches.
Oh wow!
You guys share one now. Flirtuations.
Flirtuation.
Oh, it was a man in there. He had on a cowboy hat. I said, "Do you have a farm? Because I would love to, come tend to some animals." And he was like, "Yeah, I do. I have." He's like, "I'm an equestrian. I got horses." I said, "Oh, that's crazy. I love to ride." And then he said, "I can definitely give you lessons. Like we do. I have a nonprofit. I do lessons for children." I said, "Yeah, real man."
Wow.
I definitely feel too young for this conversation.
Yeah. That's equestrian. I'm thinking
throwing shit out there to see what lands.
Yeah, this man is having horses performing and stuff. It's a little different.
He does like a nonprofit where he teaches kids how to ride, specifically black boys. Like he does like mentorship with black boys and stuff. I mean, it seemed cool. I'm not into the nonprofit industrial complex like that. So I was like, "Do you have a real job?" But he does have a real job too. So.
Damn. Must be nice.
Let me find out all these nonprofiteers don't have a real job. That's messed up.
I mean, there's over 7,000 nonprofits in Memphis, so usually you got to have another job because it's only so many
Wow.
grants you can get.
Wow, facts. And we know, yeah, wow. And we know the Kamal types get the first bid. They get the first dibs.
I was
So
just
everybody
talking
else,
shit about that yesterday. I said, you get out here getting these grants, ain't you? Getting land and shit.
He got grants and a farm. So there you go.
Because he light skinned.
so it's funny you said that because a couple years ago, and this is gonna be revealed one day when I write my memoirs. But I was trying to go through the grant process on campus, and on the low, and I actually filed this in my initial report. I was told by the woman running the office that someone in my college was circumventing the process and basically duplicating ideas, but getting there first and getting the money. And Amber, they're light skinned. So
Sound just like some shit a light skinned nigga would do.
and and when this person showed up in our college, three of us light skins had a meeting. And we all agreed. We had a light skin meeting, and we all agreed that we were going to be the first targeted because this dude works like Highlander. He got to be the only one. He's not like we all team light skin. He's like, I need to be the only one.
That's
And
crazy.
sure enough, each one of us got removed. So
Like one by pick you off one by one.
yep. And
That's
so
wild.
you could say light skin privilege is real, but light skins get targeted by other light skins too. So
I mean, because you up to them. It can only be, I told you it can only be one. I can only handle one light skinned friend at a time.
and I agreed with you, and even the light skins agree with you. So we target each other in our friend groups.
So what's that chapter gonna be? The Asians don't stick together, the Jews don't stick together, and neither does the light skins. That's gonna be
Right.
the chapter. There?
Basically.
Yeah. That's what it's gonna be. It's gonna be if light skins stuck together like the Jews and the Asians, we might actually be able to come up for real. Because this light skin privilege is only relative to the experience of dark skin folks. And that's not enough. I can't just be doing better than dark skins. I'm trying to live my best light skin life. Yeah, I gotta, you know what I mean? So I gotta get rid of the other one. So
I do want to address something. Somebody in the chat said I was sipping drugs. I just want to say this is hibiscus tea with like a little green tea mixed in it with some lemon balm tinctures that I make and some CBD tinctures. Ooh. And I just happen to put it in a large
wait. Homemades? You do homemades?
Yeah, like one of my friends, she made me a tea blend. It's like hibiscus tea, chamomile, some lemon balm, some red clover, and I took like that, and I also put some green tea in there, and then I make tinctures separately that I also put in the tea. So I made a lemon balm tincture and a CBD tincture and some yarrow, a yarrow tincture, and I put them in there.
And Jared, she says CBD, not THC. Now.
I know. That was my next question.
I said CBD, but I can mail you a CBD tincture.
No, I don't want that. I want what I do need though is I need to in all seriousness, I need to start teaming up with some homemade cooks. Because I think I need to start finding a backup to an alternative to smoking.
You should.
Good idea.
But
I love a good microdose versus smoking, like a little microdosing edible or tincture. Those to me have better effects than smoking.
Well, I would say that if I could find the right arrangement, because what I have found back in the day in the so-called black market and what I find today in the so-called legal market is insufficient. So I either have to go broke.
I know a guy.
Because the dispensaries, first of all, it's just not potent enough, and you go broke. So I would have to spend. First of all, I'd have to spend hundreds of dollars and eat way more calories. Like that's the other thing I got to be mindful of. I got a calorie count. I am a calorie counting. I'm on that calorie count.
That's why I microdose, so you don't have like. So when if you do like what you're doing, smoking, it hits you really hard. Versus microdosing, I don't get like those cravings and stuff, but I still feel the high. because
All right,
I'm
we'll have
doing
to see.
very
We'll have
small
to see.
doses.
I actually got
Over
a guy to go from Baltimore to Atlanta who has infused wine, but also he does the foods too. So
Now, if we could get in touch, if we could link me up with this infused wine guy, I would love that. And then
I'll
the
do it.
butter and all that stuff, I'm with you on all that. I just need to update I just need to do some research. That's all. I just had to put in some work. I just have not felt like doing the work. But I
And you
need
gotta
to do
make
the
sure you
work.
separate that wheat butter in the food that you're making from your children.
Oh yeah. First of all, I don't cook for the house, so that's not going to be. I'm not allowed to cook for the house. Although I would be nice.
Screaming.
I would be nice. I'm but no, you're right about that. No. We're not over here. No, we're not trying to.
Geechee, you
infuse
having
the
a guy that's
children.
running wine is interesting. I agree with Goddess. She said Geechee having a guy running wine is interesting.
man, chill
So
out,
why you
man.
why you got somebody running wine?
I mean, he been doing it before I know him. So yeah, it's a really good time. So I'm gonna text him right now.
Let's feel free to share my number.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Why'd you get banned from the kitchen, Jared?
Huh?
Why'd you get banned from the kitchen?
Years and years ago,
Okay.
I tried to make pancakes from scratch. I thought I was doing the most. I woke up early and I was going to surprise the babies and my wife with a homemade from scratch, not that batter mix nonsense. And things just went way left. And we had to I think I had to end up ordering something or go get something. It went way left. Kitchen was a mess. Children woke up to fear that their house was on fire. It was a mess. So since
Poor
then,
kids, they probably traumatized.
somewhere in there, they understand that Pops was trying to, he was trying, and it was all with love.
Mhm.
But don't worry about how. Don't worry about how, old grease.
I mean,
Things just happen. Things just happen.
The story started, and I knew how already.
That's why my sister don't cook at our house no more either. We was like in like high school. She was trying to cook something. I think it was like something basic, like some eggs or something, and set the house on fire. Like literally, there was like still smoke on the top of the little the cabinets above where the stovetop is, like to this day.
Hey, ain't Leah from Philly? Who all from Philly in this chat? We got several bones to pick with y'all.
What happened in Philly?
They released the wrong political prisoner. Meek Mill. You seen this tweet by Meek Mill?
Is that Elon Musk?
Yeah, he's sharing Elon Musk's, because Elon must be sharing all these Luigi
things,
AI arts. So you see all the black.
Real quick, before you go on, let me bring onto the stage, since we talking about freeing the wrong people. let's bring Kamal K. Franklin into the mix.
I had Khalil. Where's Khalil? He back there too?
This is too much. Look at the baby.
Oh wow. Good morning.
But
that's a fly. Everybody got new Target hoodies.
Basically, yes. We all got.
Everybody got the new hoodie. That's what kind of
Everybody
fly
got the
right
new hoodie.
there.
This is what he should have wore. The person that remained nameless.
Right. That's what he should have done. Right.
Ask him if he can breathe. Oh, he took the mask off.
Yeah, they got little air holes. You know what I'm saying? Little tubes for oxygen. You know
what's up?
His hair looks so cute.
Oh.
Supposedly he's sick, and so I'll be taking him to the doctor later. Supposedly.
Oh, he lying, but I love that for you.
Well done, little man.
Look at the little
well
smart.
done. Well done. It's a Friday. I used to have them Friday ills too. Cough. And then back in the day, we used to be able to get away with it, like hold the thermometer under the pillow or in your armpit or something real quick before mom comes back in the room, get it all warmed up. I don't know how things work now. They got all the new high tech stuff. You can't.
Yeah. Our household is all you gotta do is like do a couple of fake. I'm sick. And then the next person out of his mouth was like, Ma said I can't watch TV.
Yeah, well,
Yeah, that's how sick you are.
what's the point of being sick if you can't watch TV?
True
That's
indeed.
messed up.
True
That's
indeed.
messed up. That's how I got hooked on Days of Our Lives.
Exactly. All my children for me.
Man, I was like, word, this be happening every day while I'm in school.
And he gonna be like, that's how I got hooked on the Remix Morning Show.
Exactly. Exactly. It's like, let me find out. All right, my bad. Go ahead, Geechee. What's
no.
who
So
got out here, man?
So Meek Mill is sharing Elon Musk's Twitter AI art. So you have the black man standing behind Luigi getting executed. Looked like he's on an electric chair. But so obviously Meek Mill is saying everyone should make AI art. And then he's saying the song matches too. But then at the bottom he has RIP to the CEO 2. His life matters too. Never overlooking the life of a human unless they're a danger to society. I don't know anything about the healthcare CEOs except what is that? Senate Care? Because they are for us! ! And then there's my homeboy got me jumping like a clown. But yeah.
Wait, he was saying there's an insurance company is for us?
No, he's saying all of them are for us.
No, it's for us. They be freeing the wrong motherfuckers.
See, they shouldn't have free.
I mean,
y'all should have got Mamiya about it instead of.
It's the way I said that, and the baby leaned in. Do not say that.
Language. This now, language. Sorry. There'll be a lot of curtailing for the next 30 minutes. I apologize for that. But,
It's okay. He'll be all right. Just don't say that word. I mean, I don't think there's anything wrong with saying it, but your daddy does. I think that language should be used by everyone.
there's no experimentation in front of the parenting. There's no. I don't need additional parenting. I just gave a block. Language.
I'm a great parent. I just feel like sometimes people need my tips. I raised a dog for 8 years. He's like, it's the way Carlos on my side for me. He's like, yeah, this getting good. I know, right?
So I was just looking at this story but I think it's cover this that Erica had left us. It's a couple days old now. What is this that he denied extradition? Contest extradition? What was
his lawyer is fighting against the extradition right now because he's in Pennsylvania with the charges he has in Pennsylvania. I was watching this TikTok thing about it earlier. So the charges he has in Pennsylvania are just about a forged ID and like a forged passport or something. He has some forged documents on him and stuff like that. It's not about the killing thing. So his lawyer is fighting against those right now. And I said the lawyer, he's going to be fully theatrical. And I believe that we should bring theatrics back to the court because that man said, the lady was like, well, what about the mask? He had masks on him. He said, aren't we in a pandemic? Aren't folks still getting sick? I can go in the store and buy a 5-pack of masks right now. He said, what the evidence I've seen? Here's the evidence I've seen. Zoom in right here.
Oh, he's got one of those lawyers. This is what I was hoping for. We need a trial of the century.
Yes, that's a great lawyer.
Zoom in close right here. That's all I see.
Who? Oh man! And how did the lawyer get selected? Did the lawyer go find him, or had he already? Had he already?
I don't know if his family did it or what, because I know his.
Got to be family because he's got too much money to get a legal aid attorney, so he's not getting a legal aid.
I wish I went to law school for this. I wish I was. I'd have been like, let me do it.
Did y'all see the meme? If he's fit, you gotta acquit.
Oh wow!
Hey, I don't fuck with white men, but that nigga is fine. I said, now wait a minute. He been in the gym. I ain't never seen a white man stay fit for this long. Like they posted pictures of him from 10 years ago. He still look good.
So the TikTok I saw though said that he was intentionally posting. Who sent me that? That he was intentionally posting certain pictures of himself to show that he had also suffered some back injury. that had not been properly treated.
No, that's not his. That wasn't his back injury. It was his mom. So he wrote a
His
whole
mom. Okay,
wrote a whole
thank you.
manifesto. It's very political. I should probably. I think you should do a whole episode covering it. But the whole thing was about how his mom started experiencing pain 15 plus years ago, and she would get some relief here and there, and then they would deny her medication, and then she would get some relief here and there, and they would deny it again. Then she finally got diagnosed with whatever she actually had, and she had to have something put into her back. And so all of his reasoning, I guess you could say, even though no one can prove he did anything, as far as I'm concerned, but it's because of the pain that his mom experienced. He talked about like how she would wake up in the night screaming, and he would have to go sleep on the couch because he couldn't like not wake up from her screaming. She would have to crawl to the bathroom because she physically could not walk because she was in so much pain. And he just had to watch all of that. So he's just like extremely traumatized. Now that don't mean he killed nobody. I just think he was saying the healthcare system is trash, which I agree.
I think I did hear that he also had. I think people in the chat are saying, but he also did have a back injury.
Yeah,
surgery and so forth. Can you somebody pull up the manifesto?
I was about to ask, can you pull up that clip of his lawyer? I was trying to look for one, but I don't know.
You can.
I was trying.
Let's see, Luigi Manifesto.
Because I've heard different. I haven't seen the actual individual. I haven't seen the actual manifesto, but I've heard.
I only got through like 5 or 6 pages. It's long, so I never
got.
Well,
he did have a whole notebook.
He had the back injury. I just remember him talking about his mom for a long time. Like it goes on and on, talking about like because it goes from like literally from him as a child experiencing his mom being sick or whatever, and then breaks down the whole timeline. That's why something y'all fan fiction. You know, I'm just here to do my big one.
Yeah, this might take more time than. What does Michael Moore have to do with this? Is he going to make a movie?
Another one? Well, we did play what he yelled out when he got arrested. Like after he was taken to Central Booking, right? He yelled out something about the healthcare. So he obviously, I mean, he at this stage is obvious he took it politicized him in some way. The injury to his mother, maybe his own injury, but it politicized him in some way where this was, somebody who obviously wasn't prior, and it was the actual events of his life that led him to be like these folks are getting away with injury, like you're not paying for people's injuries, literally killing people for not providing coverage. And he decided at some point, he had enough and he had to do something about it.
So this is from Ken Klippenstein's Substack, where he says he obtained the copy of the suspected killer Luigi Mangione's manifesto, the real one, not the forgery circulating online. But he'll have more on this later. But for now, here's the manifesto. But it's not. Apparently, this is just a clip. But it reads, to the feds, I'll keep this short because I do respect what you do for our country. To save you a lengthy investigation, I state plainly that I wasn't working with anyone. This was fairly trivial. Some elementary social engineering, basic CAD. What does that stand for? A lot of patience. The spiral notebook, if present, has some straggling notes and to-do lists that illuminate the gist of it. My tech is pretty locked down because I work in engineering, so probably not much info there. I do apologize for any strife of traumas, but it had to be done. Frankly, these parasites simply had it coming. A reminder, the U.S. has the #1 most expensive healthcare system in the world, yet we rank roughly 42nd in life expectancy. United is the indecipherable largest company in the U.S. by market cap, behind only Apple, Google, Walmart. It has grown and grown, but as our life expectancy, no. The reality is these indecipherable have simply gotten too powerful, and they continue to abuse our country for immense profit because the American public has allowed them to get away with it. Obviously, the problem is more complex, but I do not have space, and frankly, I do not pretend to be the most qualified person to lay out the full argument. But many have illuminated the corruption and greed, e.g. Rosenthal, Moore, decades ago, and that's where Michael Moore must come in. And the problems simply remain. It is not an issue of awareness at this point, but clearly power games at play. Evidently, I'm the first to face it with such brutal honesty, end quote.
But this is the one that I've seen. I have not seen the longer one.
I posted one in the private chat of the longer one for everybody saying I'm giving out misinformation. I just didn't see the part that said he had a back injury too. So, just chill out. Not too much on me. Not too much.
Oh wait, that's not the where is it? Oh, here it is. My bad. I
Put it in the private chat. I read all the way to the like middle of the page, and then I do see right there where it says he had his own chronic back pain. I just didn't see that part yet.
Allopathic complex and its consequences. Luigi Mangione's last words. Well, they're not his last words.
I think I found it, but I'm not sure. Starting at 110. I put that link in the chat.
You found what?
The video of his lawyer.
So I don't know how much we want to read of this, but it starts off: the Second Amendment means I am my own chief executive and commander in chief of my own military. Is that what that means? I authorize my own act of self-defense in response to a hostile entity making war on me and my family. Nelson Mandela says no form of violence can be excused. Camus says the same, whether you live or die or have a cup of coffee. MLK says violence never brings permanent peace. Gandhi says that nonviolence is the mightiest power available to mankind. That's who they tell you are heroes. That's who our revolutionaries are. Yet is that not capitalistic? Nonviolence keeps the system working at full speed ahead. What did it get us? Look in the mirror. They want us to be nonviolent so they can grow fat off the blood they take from us. The only way out is through. Not all of us will make it. Each of us is our own chief executive. You have to decide what you will tolerate.
Now,
so this one is being
disputed about the gladiator because we don't care about any of that.
Yeah. So just to be clear, this one is also being, not just from the chat, from other sources, this one is being, there is suggestion that this one may not be the real one. Like this
so that's what Klippenstein was saying. Is I think that's why he was saying that there's a fake one going out.
Yeah.
Which is why I'm unsure about the back pain thing, because people were saying that they aren't sure that this one is real. So I was like, how do we know if the back pain thing is real then? I don't know.
That's why we need a long
other stories that have documented
trial.
That he's had his own back pain. And then I've also heard stories about his mother's back individually. I've heard stories about the mother's back pain, but I've read several stories about his own back pain or whatever. But it's, again, either way, it's obvious that this guy took a very political stance, based on either his own or family members' back pain or whatever.
And Geechee, you said 110 to start the clip?
Yeah.
All right.
That plea. So right now, though, you're telling us that he is pleading not guilty.
That is correct.
He doesn't say you were under the impression, or you're trying to defend the client on the fact that he is not the shooter?
Listen, I haven't seen any evidence that says that he's the shooter. So that's, like I said earlier, and I wasn't kidding around. A couple of things. If you're going to report something, report it accurately. And remember, and this is not just a small thing, the fundamental concept of American justice is a presumption of innocence, and until you're proven guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. And I've seen zero evidence at this point. And so I'm not even aware of what any charges.
I'm sorry, that's just regarding the extradition request from.
Well, the only hearing today was the extradition. So we got to take one step at a time. It's a long process. Can be a long process.
The photos that police released, the NYPD release of him.
I'm sorry?
The photos, the NYPD release of your client.
I don't have any control over what the NYPD does. And if they release something, I hope I can get my hands on them. And if you guys get them, send them to me. I'd appreciate it.
Clarify something. You pled for him not guilty in the state of Pennsylvania about the charges here. Can you when did that happen?
Well, he has a hearing coming up. I believe it's the 20-somethingth. I can't recall. A lot happened today. So until they haven't even had a prima facie case established yet. So they'd have to have a prima facie case established before the case can move on to the Court of Common Pleas. So the burden's always on the government, thank God. And that's their burden, and they're going to have to produce some evidence, and we're anxious to see it.
Understanding that you have said you have not seen charges coming out of New York yet, that if and when there are, and you have seen them, will you be pleading not guilty to those as well?
That would be my expectation. That certainly would be my advice.
Your client's demeanor the past 2 days at the arraignment and again today at the hearing, at some points he was smiling, laughing. You even had to actually tell him to stop talking. what are his feelings right now?
Well-
He seems outspoken.
Well, all I can, well, he's obvious, I said earlier, use your common sense. If you put yourself in, you or a loved one in that position, it's, natural, I think, to go through many emotional states. As far as him not talking, as long as I'm going to be the lawyer, I'm going to do all the talking. My client's not going to say anything.
A quick question about process. I was also at the hearing last night. I don't remember any plea being asked for or entered.
Okay. As long as he hasn't pled guilty, that's all I care about. So.
In the Blair County case, it's just not the.
Well, I'm telling you, as his lawyer, he didn't have any lawyer of record, and he didn't have any representation until I got involved this afternoon. And I'm telling you, he's pleading not guilty to each and every of those
When
charges.
does that plea normally happen? At that first hearing?
Like I said, normally that could happen at the.
Oh, my bad. I didn't see you said I could stop. Okay, my bad. Okay.
Oh, yeah.
I was interested in all
No,
that.
no, I would say
my
I
bad.
said it whenever you
Oh, my
want. To. I
bad.
ain't say stop now.
I'll put it back. I'll put it
I mean,
back.
you know,
my bad.
we got our hood,
I like the lawyer.
we got our hood lawyer on the screen.
I was
So
gonna say I like my man.
Hold on,
You know,
hold on.
talk about, he was giving.
He's a little animated. You gotta be fast with them slick reporters with their devious questions about innocence and guilt.
This is the part where he was asking about the mask.
Yeah.
There
Oh,
are, and you have
on.
seen them. Will you be pleading not guilty to those as well?
That would be my expectation. Well,
He seems outspoken.
Well, all I can, he's obvious, I said earlier, use your common sense. If you,
Process. I was also at the hearing last night. I don't remember any plea being asked for or entered.
okay. As long as he hasn't pled guilty, that's all I care about. So.
In the Blair County
You know,
case, it's
Jared,
just not.
Well, I'm telling you, as his lawyer, he didn't have any lawyer.
Huh?
Well, there's this handy dandy tool on YouTube where you can click the transcript and look for a word.
And I'm telling you.
So if you do that, you can just search mask and it'll take it to that part of the video.
Hey, I'm just trying to satisfy all interests. Kamal said, let it run. You know what I'm saying? Hold on.
What happened last night at the informal arraignment, which is at the magisterial district judge.
So is he telling you this is all some sort of awful mistake?
I'm not going to talk about anything he's told me.
How do you end up in Altoona?
I'm not going to talk masks. They say numerous masks. A lot of times when you buy masks, you got to buy masks. They say numerous. I mean, I don't know. We're heard that they let me know about it.
Earlier today, you talked about the masks possibly being related to coronavirus. Could you elaborate on that?
Well, I mean, yeah. I mean, I don't know where you all are from, but I still see people wearing masks. They say numerous masks. A lot of times when you buy masks, you got to buy them. They don't. I guess you can buy them individually, but every time I bought them, they come in boxes. So I don't know. All I can tell you is that's not a crime. It's not a crime.
Did your client indicate to you that the reason for the mask was because of the COVID?
I would not ever indicate anything that he indicated to me.
What's
I
his
can't get into
demeanor
that.
like? Is he worried?
Well, I'm not going to speculate on that, but like I said, use your common sense. If you were in a jail or confined in a state where supposedly there's rumors going around you're going to be charged with murder,
A lot of hand movements.
use your common sense.
Well, you talked to him.
us about your client?
What's that?
What can you tell us about your client?
Probably not a whole lot.
What were your first impressions of him whenever you met with him or spoke with him for the first time?
I'm not like the airplane movie said, hey, give us your impression. The guy says, I don't do impressions. So I wasn't looking for impressions. What I was trying to do was form a bond with my client. I want him to trust me, and I want him to be confident that I'm here for him. And I feel that I'm very pleased how that went.
How about his mental and his physical
Let me be
health?
honest here. He's loving this publicity.
How-
he's
so
getting.
hell
how
yeah.
about his mental and
Yeah.
his
Let's be
physical
honest.
health?
Yeah.
Online, he appeared to
Yeah.
frequently discuss the
Lawyers
spine
love
injuries
this.
he may have had, and do you think that could have contributed?
He's
Standing in front of his-
I'm an attorney.
Yes.
I'm not a physician.
And he's standing in front of
I'm
his logo.
speculating. I'm not going to do that.
Exactly.
Smart.
There's a lot of benefits to that. It would take too long for me to get into all that. It's we're testing the process. I haven't seen anything. I have not seen one scintilla, one speck, one drop of any evidence yet. So it's what I decided. I think that it was in our best interest to do today.
We could stop with you guys if you want. Yeah. So I feel like it's interesting.
yeah, that's how I found my found the words through the transcript.
Yeah.
So
So I mean,
Buy that clip or something. That's what I do.
so it's really early in the process, obviously extremely early. And the first, no lawyer is going to plead guilty at this particular stage. No client's going to, initially plead guilty, even if there is so-called overwhelming evidence against that person. So this is all standard practice, is to he's gathering information, he's meeting his client, like he says, he's hearing about his client's mental state, he's marshaling information. But there is no doubt that there's two things that'll happen. One is, obviously, he's going to negotiate and try to get a potential plea or see what the district attorney is trying to offer. New York does not have a death penalty, so the thinking is probably going to be something around 25 to life. I doubt if they're going to come down off of that. New York does not want to put itself in a position to be looked upon as a city that will go easy on someone who kills CEOs, particularly when New York is the financial, economic hub of the country. And so their purview is going to be, they're going to try to do everything they can to protect that future CEOs, and them feeling safe. The other thing is that there's a concept called jury nullification. This guy has received such good press. The idea of jury nullification is that even if the evidence is overwhelming that the person committed a particular act, the jury decides that, notwithstanding that, they don't want to send that person to prison. That's happened in a lot of political cases early within U.S. history, in terms of so-called U.S. so-called patriots fighting and so forth. There's been times where people have gotten off because the jury has said, even if you're telling me this is a crime, even if the evidence is overwhelmingly this is a crime, we as the jury are deciding that we don't want to convict. Courts frown on it. Courts try to make sure that this kind of stuff doesn't happen. But once that, and I've seen places where, might even participate in a couple, where little notes are passed, in court, little statements are made, little things are held up so that juries can be a little educated on their rights, even potential jurors can be educated on their rights. Jurors have a right to acquit, even if the evidence suggests otherwise. So that is something to take into play also.
Interesting. Obi says in Maryland, you cannot say jury nullification, but you can act in that manner.
Most courts are like that. Most courts will not let you present, and they would not allow the attorney to say something on the lines of, even if you think this person is guilty, you could still, right? You can still, You'll have to hint at that, but you can't say it directly. And then, of course, you'll have the other side jumping up and suggesting the person is saying, hey, jury nullification, that's like, it's not supposed to be spoken about, mistrial, start all over again, that kind of thing. So there's ways in which you'll have to play around with this, because there's no doubt that there seems to be at this stage overwhelming evidence that they got.
But his lawyer hasn't seen any. I like that. His lawyer's like, I don't know what you do. I haven't seen it. All I know is he got a charge here in Pennsylvania. I'm saying he's not guilty.
The other interesting thing, real quick, is that, and this is also and he's right. At the NYPD, the New York City, the government of New York City, they're releasing information to the media to have this person already considered guilty in public square, right? Before they've been given information over to the attorney, to the client, they are leaking information. They obviously are leaking information to show and again, federal courts, federal prosecutors do this, state prosecutors, county, city, it doesn't matter. They all attempt to leak to show you that they have the goods, which is meant to influence potential jurors, right? And to get these kind of stories out that show that all this information is out there. And so anybody who comes in will automatically be predisposed to suggest that that person is guilty. So, it's not any accident that they're releasing either manifestos or suggesting what kind of evidence they have, because they're doing it themselves to influence a jury pool.
But if a jury does that, the judge doesn't have the right to then can't the judge dismiss the jury's ruling in certain cases? Haven't I heard that before? Can the judge overrule the jury's decision if they feel like some shadiness is going on?
They can't do it on an innocence. They can do it if someone is found guilty and there's unconstitutional reasons or rationales that are suggested for that why that guilty plea can't stand.
But they can't overturn a not guilty.
Can't overturn a not, i.e., why OJ was never retried, right? That's like double jeopardy.
Because Ito, right? Oh, but Ito in that moment couldn't have said, "Hold up, this jury decision is some nonsense. I'm throwing that out. He's going to prison." Okay.
And if it's found guilty, then it takes appeals to, to get that person that guilty plea. I mean, that guilty conviction overturned in some way.
So, Kamal, question. So you mentioned when you first started, you talked about he's gonna assess the status of his client's mental health or something like that. And so it made me think of two things. It made me think of Michael X. Johnson, who was helping with mentally disturbed or youth. And then it made me think of Frantz Fanon when he wrote his resignation letter. And he was like, ain't nothing wrong with these damn people. What's wrong with this system? And then he joined the revolution. So with our mental health, I guess, being warped, right? So if you have more radical beliefs, they can conclude you to be mental. When, even E. Franklin Frazier and other people said that, a lot of these people who believe in American Project are engaged in the world make-believe. So I said all that to ask, like, how do you begin to, as a lawyer, deal with your client who's not saying that this white boy is radical, but your client who's actually has radical politics and will be considered crazy or out of his damn mind? Like, how do you grapple with that as a lawyer?
I mean, there's a couple of other ways he can go. Not that I'm suggesting he's headed this way, but he can claim some sort of mental incompatibility or something along those lines. He can claim that what now do I have to be tests done? I'm saying this not within a revolutionary or radical context, but saying that his client was mentally unstable, and boom, we've had several doctors who've interviewed him, who've spoken to him, and that may be a defense, right? But of course, the prosecution is going to argue against that, and the judge will make a ruling around whether or not this person is "quote unquote" mentally capable to stand for trial. But he may claim some mental distress as a reason for his action in terms of trying to get a lighter sentence something along those lines. It is interesting. It'll be interesting to see this. Obviously, this attorney doesn't seem to be an overtly politicized attorney, but whether or not he'll bring in some political factors or attempt to bring in political factors around the motivation for something like this. Again, the prosecution will argue hard against turning this into a political trial. So any information or evidence as to what may justify the killing in the mind of the defendant, the prosecution will argue against, except to establish that he had motive. And his motive was that he thought he was seeking revenge for others. So a justification that will allow the prosecution to suggest that his motive is here, but not a justification that allows to say, again, for the jury to say, oh, nullify, right? So there's, I think there's going to be some different tactics. They obviously, I don't think they're going to try to get overtly political, but I may be wrong. It's just that the lawyer doesn't strike me as such or whatever.
Well, if Cousin Vinny, if you're watching, Attorney Cousin Vinny, make sure you read the letter to the resident minister by Frantz Fanon in 1956. There's a line that says the function of a social structure is to set up institutions to serve man's needs. A society that drives its member to desperate solutions is a non-viable society, a society to be replaced. So Cousin Vinny, read that and use that in your...
My favorite comment so far... My favorite comment so far is when people saying, oh, Italian is white, because they kept saying Italian American. And it was like, I just realized Italian is just a white man. I said, y'all are so stupid.
Well, his name, Luigi is the name. I was like, that's old school. he might have to kill just getting that name happening to go through school.
He probably got
with that
hella
name.
family money. That bloodline probably rich.
Hey, all I know is, again, they said Gilman School in Baltimore, and that's, to me, says a bunch of money.
What's the Gilman School?
So, well, I only know of it because I went for 2 years to Baltimore Friends, which was part of this collage of elite schools in Baltimore. And
Like Gossip Girl for Black people?
no, not for Black people. I mean, it was. Although it was funny, the only other Black male that I remember being in my grade was also named Jared, spelled the same way, which is weird. But anyway, salute to him. He told me he immediately went to Howard after high school because he was like, I need some Blackness. He was like, I need. But I was there for 8th and 9th grade, so I just know that, and I just know it was like McDonough, Gilman, Park, were these collage of elite schools that you literally don't even see physically when you're in the city unless you know to be in that area. It's a like I've been teaching at Morgan in East Baltimore now for almost 20 years. I have never once seen any of these schools in the normal course of me going to and from work or anything like that. So you don't see that part of the city if you're not supposed to be there. So I just associated with that. Now, again, I was there for 2 years.
Boarding school or no?
No. It's just regular schools, but it's like a lot of money. A lot of elite folks go to these schools. But as I was saying, I went and I was there on some, I don't really even know the full extent of how my mother worked this out. I know she had to borrow money from a friend or something like that, but I was on some sort of scholarship or some kind of funky arrangement that allowed me to end up there. So theoretically, he could not necessarily be from that elite class and still be there, but I do associate it with that. When I hear about these spaces. So, there it is. So that's all.
The other thing that comes to mind, Brigitte was talking about, if this case was held, or if this had happened in a more conservative setting, the idea of jury nullification would be that much more prominent in terms of a possible way to get off. Because I was just thinking about the Bundy case, right? The Bundys, remember, like the Nevada ranchers who basically stood up against the FBI. And if I remember later on, like one of the sons,
they had a standoff with the ATF.
The ATF, was it? And then later on, one of the sons, they took over some area of federal land, and they got caught. They got into a shootout, if I remember, and they went to trial. And if I remember correctly, they were found innocent, or they were found not guilty, and released or whatever. So again, this may not be the same thing in a New York City area, but if again, even though this guy is not some open, I assume nothing so far has suggested that he's some Trump supporter. But if they get, again, if they decide to take this to trial, if they get the right jury, and in New York, it may make sense to take it to trial. And again, there's no death penalty. I mean, what are they going to offer him in a plea that he wouldn't get at the end of a trial? I mean, a plea deal they're going to give him life anyway. So what would be the point in taking that? He might as well go to trial and see what takes place. New York ain't going to offer him like 10 years after he killed the CEO. You know what I mean? They're not going to be like, there's not going to be that much of a difference in terms of what he would get if he went to trial and lost and what the plea offer would be. So in some ways, it may make sense for him to go to trial.
Take that shit to trial.
Please go to trial. But but I thought they said they found the gun in his bag. Haven't they been able?
Everything. They found everything.
That's what I'm saying.
What you've seen so far, yeah.
But haven't they gone through the step already of matching the gun to the bullets? And then, I mean, so when the lawyer is saying, "I've seen no evidence," or of these or he's not yet been charged yet. What's?
Well, right now, again, he's taking an innocence plea, so he's not going to admit to anything publicly right now. and nor should he. Right? I mean, it's not. It's standard practice is either I have no. This case is just beginning. No evidence has been presented to me. What you hear in the public, or maybe what you hear, but none of that information has been given to me for us to examine, to review, to look over. At this particular stage, again, me and my client are speaking about this matter. He is pleading not guilty. He's pleading innocent because he is innocent. And we plan to fight this case with everything we have at our disposal. That makes no difference if in 3 months he's like, we decided to take a plea. We found that it was important that we put an end to this. My client takes full responsibility for his actions. Those those have nothing to do with each other right now. Right now, he's on one end of the scale, and when he feels he cannot go any further with this, or they, whatever, for whatever reason, on the other scale, he'll come out and make a statement completely opposite, almost like your man Joe Biden, right? Like Joe Biden with his pardon. At one point, his public was, "I'll never pardon my son. That'll never happen. This is not happening." When you all knew, 3 months later, I looked seriously at this and I had to decide that this was best. So,
So is this showing that, I guess, his wealth or class, and he doesn't have a public defender that will push him into a plea deal quick, or?
No, I mean, not at this stage. I mean, again, even a public defender at this stage wouldn't take a plea at this stage. I mean, this is way too early. I mean, my man was just arrested, 4 or 5 days ago?
He doesn't even have murder charges. They're just for forgery.
Yeah, he's just way too early to,
in his backpack. He was in a McDonald's. He was in the public. Could have went to the restroom. Somebody dropped that shit in there.
So
I mean, we're not even sure if he's been arraigned at this particular stage, where charges have been presented before him in New York, and he's been formally charged and indicted or whatever. So this is going to play out for a little while longer. And again, it doesn't mean that they may not take a plea at some point. But again, as stated earlier, what would be the point of that in New York, where there's no death penalty?
Hey, his cousin is a Republican.
Oh, that's Luigi.
Yeah, that's his cousin. My brother was letting us know, because my brother said so. Nino is a Republican. So if he's a Republican, let him be a Republican, and this go to trial, and this gets even better.
The Democrats gonna work.
All right, so this is.
I just want to say, I put an article in the chat because somebody in the chat said that the ATF standoff is the Waco, Texas code, and it's not. The ATF were also at the Bundy thing, and y'all stay saying shit in this chat about stuff I be saying like I don't know what I'm talking about. Please go to hell.
You just got on day one, B. This is day one. Why are you fighting already with the stay out the chat?
I mean, this is my first day. I've been on here before, but I'm just saying.
It's day one and a half.
I love disputing what people say.
Listen, man.
I remember this standoff.
Really
and they got off.
What actually happened? Because that shit was crazy.
Bureau of Land Management, the real BLM.
Federal land. It was like, we're not leaving and we're not paying for anything. Come get us.
We the people, we not the BLM. And I know they're talking about Bureau of Land Management, but I just think it's funny. Oh, look at this guy.
Black Liberation Media, man.
And then they had the ATF oversee rounding up all of his cattle, and that they took away his grazing rights, and that he had to work with them to get the rights back.
But there were 2 or 3 different incidents. That was the first incident, and then later on, his kids, right? His kids tried to take over federal land for a while. They in fact, not tried. They literally took over federal land for a little while. So basically went on the land, kicked off the rangers and all that kind of stuff, and they held it for a number of days. I remember that.
It's March 27, 2014. They took over federal land in Clark County that was temporarily closed for capture, impound, and removal of trespass cattle. And then that's when the BLM officials and law enforcement came in to oversee it or something. But it was his sons who took over the land.
Okay.
So, in the right place, in the right time, in the right state of whiteness, this could easily go his way. So, And then again, we're not in these kind of political times, but remember there was particular trials in the 60s and 70s that despite several different types of evidence, a lot of political people had not guilty. Like, juries came back. The longest trial in New York City history at the time was the Panther 21 trial, where the district attorneys thought they had marshaled evidence to suggest that the Panthers were planning to plant bombs, do hijackings, and of course they thought they had a sure thing, and they had had undercover videotapes. They had undercovers who testified. If I'm not mistaken, that was how the prior bodyguard to Malcolm actually testified, and it was discovered that he was a police agent during all that time period. So there's a lot of but ultimately at the end, in that political atmosphere, folks were found not guilty, and of course they were not guilty, because of course we know our heroes would not do that stuff. So again, you never know, but it's got to be the right political environment for that to happen. You got to have the right jury and so forth. So yeah.
You know who else had federal agents secretly tape them and get them to do illegal things?
Who?
Baby Drake.
Okay.
And
What?
Who is Baby Drake?
Mayor Lumumba. I call him Baby
Oh.
Drake.
Oh.
I got about 80 people calling that man Baby Drake. I went to a convention and he was speaking. I was like, oh yeah, Baby Drake gonna speak on this panel later. And everybody started calling him that. My influence.
Wow. Okay. Hey, real quick, we have I know we have a guest coming up in a few minutes.
And you didn't get to any of the articles I sent you. That's crazy.
I didn't. Was that my fault?
It's really all three of y'all's fault.
I just got on. It.
I'm not catching strays today. I mean, I didn't even know. I didn't know we had a guest. I didn't know we had a guest host. I didn't know nothing. I didn't know Air Doctor wasn't gonna be here.
I don't know. That's on you not paying attention. I've been talking for a week now that Nick was going to be here. We got a homework assignment. We got a homework assignment. If you don't watch the morning show, that's on you, my guy.
Well, you're right.
I can't be responsible. Yeah, I can't be responsible for what you don't pay attention to.
But you told me last week when he canceled, the week before last, that he was going to be here, and then he canceled. But I didn't know about the reschedule.
So you should.
Is that popping up at 9? Is he popping up at 9? He's
supposed to be here at 9. Yeah. So nobody's paying attention.
You got 3 minutes to go through the article I sent you.
I just been talking for no reason. Which one do you want me to read? Which one do you want to pull up here?
The DOJ one, the one from the commercial appeal.
All right. Here we go. What's going on?
So I originally told Kamal I will come on and talk about this DOJ thing. So we had a DOJ investigation here in Memphis into the Memphis Police Department. And our mayor and the DOJ been going like back and forth. It's actually been very entertaining to watch. But basically, he was like, we're not signing the consent decree. And then they were like, you got to sign the consent decree. And then they was like, we're not signing the consent decree. And then the chief was like, actually, we don't even know who said these statements. Who made those eyewitness statements to you? And I was like, y'all are insane. But basically, the entire report corroborates all the stuff we've been saying about the police department for 50 plus years, but specifically the things about pretextual traffic stops, mental health officers being used, all of that stuff. We clocked that like a year and a half ago. So one of the orgs I'm a part of is Decarcerate Memphis, and we pulled thousands of traffic tickets, like 2,000 or 3,000, and went through them individually and compiled research that showed the racial disparity between Black people getting stopped for pretextual stops and white people. And the percentages that we said were specifically 4.9% more than white people. And the DOJ report says 4.5% more, literally the exact same things that we said. And I just think that it's an interesting report.
And so far at this particular stage, they're still refusing to sign the consent decree, right?
Yeah, they're not going to sign the consent decree. Here's the real tea. They can't sign the consent decree because they got about 13, 14 lawsuits around their police department from either the Scorpion Unit or regular police officers. If they sign the consent decree, that's them agreeing to work with them because they agree with the findings of the report. So then they lose all the lawsuits, one of which is $550 million. So they're not going to sign that consent decree because they can't agree that any of this stuff is true, because then they're going to lose all the lawsuits they're fighting right now.
And as
That
folks
is
don't know, these
crazy.
consent decrees with the Justice Department are voluntarily. Like there's no.
I mean, they're
they
gonna
don't
sue
have-
them, but yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, they voluntarily would sign, the agreement. But since they're not voluntarily signing, then they're just gonna probably sue them. But what was interesting to me is that a lot of the recommendations are actually stuff that we already passed as an ordinance here, or has already been recommended. So there was a recommendation about, taking all data from traffic stops. There's literally an ordinance we passed last year called the Data Transparency Ordinance, and the police department hasn't introduced any of it. They don't have anybody taking adequate information during traffic stops. They're not doing any of that stuff. And we called them out about it multiple times. They keep making excuses, which is why we had a whole campaign against the police chief getting reinstated, because you don't need to keep your job and you can't even get them to make an Excel spreadsheet about traffic reports. That's ridiculous.
All right. Well, listen, we'll happily have you come back as much as you like to talk about this and to get back more into this story and all of the other goings on. We do. And we have to, including, we have to have more discussions of your flirtuations, which was that we need to hear more about that. But in the interim, we do have a guest.
I said fluctuations, not fluctuations, but that's okay. We can start.
I said fluctuations. I said it right. Yeah, I said fluctuations.
You light skin, it didn't come out right.
I'm speechless. What more can I say? What more can I say? But I said flirtuations because I made a mental note about that word being used, and
you can do a whole segment about it.
Yeah, I feel like we need to. So, but in the interim, we do have a special guest coming and who is here. So let's honor that and keep it moving right here on the Remix Morning Show. Don't go anywhere. Here, let's go. All right, everybody, welcome back to the Remix Morning Show right here on Black Liberation Media. Amber, Geechee, Kamau, Jared, and our special guest joining us today, Nick Estes, who, among many other things, is an American Lakota community organizer, journalist, and historian at the University of Minnesota, and he has co-founded the Red Nation and Red Media podcasts and media outlets, and doing great work. Nick, it's a pleasure to finally get you to join us. Welcome. Good morning. Peace.
Good morning.
Good morning. Good morning.
It's cold here in Minneapolis.
Yeah, oddly, it's even cold here in Maryland, which is increasingly getting warmer. Seeing less and less snow every year. But listen, I do like when guests set us up with some homework assignments and things to review. To sort of frame a conversation. I'm happy to have you take this in any way, that you'd like, any direction you'd like. But I did watch this Vow of Silence, right? The anime story. I forgot the whole title, but on Hulu, which, as I texted you, I thought was a wild psychological warfare hit job on not only Indigenous history struggles, liberation struggles in general, COINTELPRO, but specifically Leonard Peltier. It was almost shocking to see. I say almost to see how this series, with no primer, no real framing, discussion, nothing, just throws him in there as basically a violent hitman, and then they leave it at that. Mm-hmm. So if there's ever anyone who ever watches this and then comes across his name later, there's going to be zero empathy for this political prisoner and that history that he represents. So that was one of the things that I took from this. But with that, sort of foundation, let me turn it over to you. What does this series do? How do you contextualize it, and how do you think, to the extent people watch it, it should be responded to?
Sure. Well, first, let me introduce myself. Hamataki Api. I'm actually from the Lord Brule Sioux tribe. This was just Sichangu. We're part of the Oceti Sakowin. Born and raised in South Dakota, And in fact, I was in college at the time that this was these trials were happening for her alleged murders, for Anna Mae Aquash's alleged murders. And I remember reading this stuff in the newspaper. And at that time, I didn't really have like a critical frame of reference to really respond or ask questions about what was going on. I think the general consensus, I was teaching summer high school in Rapid City at the time, where all these trials took place. Rapid City has the name of racist city, meaning that, like it's a notoriously anti-Indian border town in the heart of our territory in Xisapa, or a place we call that is also known as the Black Hills. And so, this happened at a time, I want to talk a little bit about the context of like these trials, because I think it's important, because we're almost like, almost 2 decades out from those trials, which started in 2000 and concluded in 2011. And at that time, the American Indian movement, what was left of it, was really kind of destroyed in terms of its credibility as an organization, even its legacy, which I think is incredibly important, because this becomes then a forbidden history for academics like myself to talk about. Because how can you write and talk about an organization that is inherently misogynist, that assassinates women who are on the rise? This is the narrative that was coming out of these trials. Because sadly, we haven't had books by Native people sympathetic with the liberation tradition written about the American Indian movement. Most of the books are written by non-Native people. There are a few, autobiographies, which are good, but there hasn't been sort of a comprehensive book. And this isn't a plug for myself, but this is my frustration. This is the book that I didn't want to write, so I began to research. And one of the first questions that you get as somebody who's researching the American Indian movement is, who killed Anna Mae Aquash? And that was something that frustrated me from the very beginning, because I joined the Leonard Peltier campaign back in 2013, officially working for his campaign, organizing events, organizing marches, teach-ins, movie showings, all those kinds of things, letter writing campaigns. And that was something that really that kind of bothered me, because if Leonard Peltier had something to do with her murder, how could I, as somebody is like an indigenous person, a Lakota person, advocate for this man's clemency? So I'll just put that out there. And I also just want to do a quick overview of this film, so those of you who are out there don't have to watch this Disney produced Hulu documentary. And I'll give the narrative, and then I'll critique the narrative, because I think that's important to do. So this film is a 4-part series. I'll say, first of all, if you watch the film, the documentary kind of evidence that they bring in terms of the film archive is actually pretty phenomenal. They do some restoration on some of these color archival footage that they found, which is really phenomenal. I thought it really brought that era to life. As somebody who's done the research and looked at some of the same films, some of the same archives that these producers have looked at, I was pretty blown away by that aspect of it. So I want to give that sort of a shout out, because that's actually kind of one of the cool things about the documentary, is that it does give you that kind of imagery of that time period. I don't think a documentary has done that yet. Most of what we see is black and white, the same sort of images that are produced by sort of the mass media. But generally, beyond the sort of archival footage, the documentary repeats this sort of narrative that was created by a Native journalist named Paul Demain, and he's featured heavily in the documentary itself. Paul Demain, he founded this outlet called News from Indian Country. He was somebody who was kind of adjacent to the American Indian movement during the novitiate takeover in 1975. There was an armed takeover in Wisconsin of a monastery that had been abandoned. That's kind of featured in the film. And he was there, and he talks about the scene where they somebody points a gun at him, and an A member allegedly points a gun at him and says, "Are you a snitch?" And that's kind of when he was like, we need to question, the values of the American Indian movement. but he also kind of casts himself kind of revealingly as an outsider to Native politics, somebody who didn't grow up in Native communities. Not to fault him, he was adopted out. He didn't know he was Native until later on in life, which sadly is the case of a lot of people because of the genocidal policies that we faced. But instead of maybe trying to correct the record, I think he kind of falls into the trap of just really. There's no other way to put this. I'm trying not to be vulgar, but just sucking from the teat of the FBI in terms of the information that he's getting. And I know this for several reasons. I've done the research, and something that isn't necessarily revealed in this documentary, but in the 90s, there was a major split that was happening within the American Indian movement, and it also centered on the Leonard Peltier Defense Committee, and I'll get into that later. So I think it's just important to kind of put that out there, that Paul Demain is this figure, and this is kind of his story. This is the story that he published on the pages of News from Indian Country, and he's kind of getting these leads and this information and these leaks from the investigators themselves. So this kind of follows, Anna Mae Aquash's, she joins the American Indian movement. She's part of the Boston Indian Council in the 70s. She kind of has a falling out with her husband at that time. She leaves her children to join the Red Power movement as she sees it, joining the American Indian movement. She aligns herself with Dennis Banks, who then becomes her lover. There's jealousy and animosity, according to the filmmakers, and this narrative that's being portrayed around Anna Mae Aquash's rise within the ranks of the American Indian movement. Anna Mae Aquash is depicted as somebody who, who's down for the cause. She's not going to sit in the kitchen. She's going to take up a gun and stand with the men. That's kind of the way she's portrayed in this documentary. She's at the Siege of Wounded Knee in 1973, where she marries Nogashik, her husband. She divorces her previous husband, Jake Maloney, who's Mi'kmaq, and Jake kind of gets custody of their children, and her children are actually kind of central to this story as well. Her daughter Denise kind of becomes this outspoken advocate for her mother. She's featured heavily in this documentary. And from 1973 to Anna Mae Aquash's murder in 1975, we kind of get this picture of AIM disintegrating following Wounded Knee. There's a lot of rumors about conspiracy. There's a major FBI infiltrator or a self-described operative named Douglas Durham who's outed. He's actually very close to Anna Mae, not in terms of they're not friends, but in terms of their alignment. Both of them are with the sort of Banks faction. And so he begins, she's suspicious of him, and he's also suspicious of her. And so there's kind of an implication. It's not overtly said that he kind of puts this, a bad jacket or a snitch jacket on her, saying that she could be the potential infiltrator. And after he's outed, the depiction in the film is that AIM sort of descends into chaos of a finger pointing. Well, who's the FBI operative? Who's the undercover? And so in 1975, at a Farmington meeting in Farmington, New Mexico, there's a brutal slaying of these Navajo men in Farmington. That's a whole that kind of falls to the wayside. It's like the background information, but there was these individuals in Farmington, New Mexico, who were mutilated and murdered by white children, essentially, and their body parts were hung in their school lockers. It was called the Farmington Massacre. So AIM came down to respond. They were invited by the community to come down to respond. And at this Farmington convention, that's when the fingers start pointing at Anna Mae Aquash officially, that she's the snitch. She's just like Doug Durham. She's a FBI infiltrator. So let's get our bag man, Leonard Peltier, who's just a thug. That's kind of how he's depicted in this film, to go put a gun to her head and ask her whether or not she's an FBI informant. And from there, it kind of the narrative kind of falls off the rails, in my opinion, because actually what happens from that point onwards is incredibly important, but they don't get into any of those details. What ends up happening is that there's the shootout in Oglala in June of 1975. Leonard Peltier goes on the run. Enemy Aquash joins them. Peltier, Banks, and Kamuk Nichols, who's talked about. Also, Kamuk's sisters is with them. Bernie Nichols. They get a motorhome. They're stopped in Oregon. Dennis Banks and Leonard Peltier flee. Both Anime and Kamuk are arrested and jailed. Anime's extradited to South Dakota because she has outstanding charges for explosives. And then a judge grants her basically, she had a hearing, and she, instead of staying overnight in jail to get that hearing in the morning, the judge lets her out for the evening. And then from that point, she basically becomes a fugitive again. And she flees from South Dakota to Denver. And in Denver, she goes to Troyland Yellowwood's home, where she's basically interrogated by her accusers. People, they name Theda Clark, which I'll get to later, as one of the accusers of Anime Aquash as being an FBI informant. And she's the reason why they were stopped in Oregon and why they got caught. And so from there, they take her to the Wounded Knee Legal Defense House in Rapid City, interrogate her. They take her to the reservation. There's kind of ambiguity about what happens, but then ultimately she's assassinated. She's killed. She's dumped on the roadside outside of a place called Scenic, and I forgot my South Dakota geography. But it's on the border or on the edge of the Pine Ridge Reservation in the Badlands. And so that's where the story that's the arc of the story. And then, of course, you have these two sort of hero cops. You have a Hispanic, Latino, a police officer from Denver, and then you have a Native man who's the first U.S. Marshal, and he has a vision. This is no joke. He has a vision. He has a vision about Anime Aquash's murder while he's as a jailer in Pine Ridge. And then he decides, I'm going to crack the case. So he grows his hair long, teams up with his buddy, Alonzo in Denver. And his name is Bob Ekefee. And then they crack the case and they reveal all this thing. And there's this implication that, maybe there's a little bit of racism within the FBI and they didn't pay enough attention. And that's why they could never solve the murder. And so it's this kind of like propaganda story arc where it's like, at the end of the day, the very people who were trying to destroy the movement and who had killed actual AIM members thus become the saviors, right? And I think this movie does a really good job at kind of like condensing that narrative and putting it into a very watchable film. I had people texting me throughout, and it's like, the sad thing about doing this work is like everyone wants to show you stuff like, what's your opinion on this really awful thing that I just watched? And so I was forced to watch it, and Jared reached out and wanted me to come on the show, and I was like, if I'm gonna come on the show, I'm gonna talk about this. And if I'm gonna talk about this, you're gonna watch it too. So Jared watched it.
And if I can, I just want to co-sign a couple of the points that you made here. One, to your point about the quality of the film, this for me is increasingly a problem. Mm-hmm. that we are getting more sophisticated, higher quality propaganda. And if you don't know any of this history, you would watch this series and just be like, wow, this is just amazing. And yeah, this Peltier guy is a thug and AIM is just a collapsing mess. And what struggle were they associated with in general? Like, it's weird, but, even the 75 Pine Ridge incident, I thought, okay, I was like, okay, now we're about to, I even went back and watched it again. It's like quick, 2 FBI agents get killed, a Native guy gets killed, and then we move on. And I'm like, what? I was like, wait a minute, what? Almost none of the real content. So it was just so, but all to drive, as you said, the story that the police are ultimately good. They're doing the best they can. It's these natives running around here, killing each other. And it's so complicated. What more could we expect from the FBI? It was kind of like they're interviewing FBI agents. This indigenous guy you're talking about you're meant to feel his pride in becoming the first in the federal government to go and become this native hunter from the people themselves. I mean, it's so crazy, but it's done in a way that if you don't have a certain view, it's gonna. So I just wanted to co-sign those couple of points.
I also think it's interesting that the narrative that they show for this documentary is completely different from the one they show about the IRA, because they make you want to believe in the police and that the Native people are so bad. But in the IRA one, they got people looking up, what's the Irish Republican Army? Like, how do this is a real movement. Like, they was really powerful. These are political heroes. They was having a hunger strike for over 200 days. Like, the whole narrative is different for these white people, for Irish people. But they was
That's interesting. It would be interesting to do a full-on comparison. I think you make a good point there.
And they're both
even the documentary, or even
they're both on Hulu, and then Hulu's been putting out this very politically charged content lately.
Mm-hmm.
That's a good point. I haven't seen the IRA documentary, but I've seen the sort of production around a lot of the Black Panther films, like even the what was it, Judas and the Black Messiah, and it's interesting. I mean, there's a lot of criticism for that film, I think, which I don't want to get into here, but in some ways it's portraying the Panthers in a positive light. But in some ways, it's also doing the same thing that this film is doing, is it's creating a martyr out of somebody. It's like, it's only good revolutionary is a dead revolutionary, right? And then they can only be redeemed by the police. That's the narrative in this particular film. And I want to back up a little bit, because I think it is important, Jared, what you point out about the shootout in 1975. And I also, in my research, it's not that I'm against the label of COINTELPRO, but I want to say that this is something, the tactics that were used were entirely different in many ways, because even the assassination of Fred Hampton wasn't directed by an actual FBI agent. He didn't pull the trigger. But the siege on Wounded Knee was actually FBI agents with armaments from the United States military engaging in their own words, paramilitary tactics. And they released a document in April of 1975 justifying the occupation, the paramilitary occupation of the Pine Ridge Indian Reservation, not for solving this spate of murders, rapes, beatings that were taking place on the reservation post 1973. They were there to destroy the American Indian movement and to anticipate some kind of military engagement with them. This is April, several months before the shootout. So it's important to point that out. That I don't know that's not COINTELPRO. That's just the paramilitarization of the FBI. And in my research, I found that this is a unique turning point. Yeah, Hoover's dead, right? The FBI is reforming itself. It's doing something entirely different. And Wounded Knee happens in the wake of Hoover's death. And this is the first time you see the FBI creating its own special operations groups, engaging in militarized tactics, and even training. It's mentioned a little bit in this film. It's the first time somebody interviewed David Price on film, who's this notorious FBI agent at that time. But he admitted, he's like, yeah, we didn't give them a hunting, or we didn't give them rifles directly. We just gave it to them for their prairie dog shooting program or whatever. And it was the first time that they admitted that they were actually supplying the vigilante arm of the tribal government with high-powered rifles. There's also hundreds of pages of documents from the Department of Military. They had this program at the time where they would loan out military equipment to federal agencies to crush, civil unrest. And there's very few instances that program was actually used, and one of them was Wounded Knee. You actually had F-4, fighter jets flying over. You had APCs. You had, for the first time, the Bureau of Indian Affairs police being trained with these high-powered, military-grade equipment. And it was kind of fascinating too. The documents that I read about some of these BIA police and the U.S. Marshals, they kind of made fun of the FBI because the FBI, they didn't like to get their hands dirty. They would always get somebody else to do it. So it was the first time that they actually had to engage in firefights with people. And for the first time, they experienced a sense of risk and danger, something that culminated in 1975 in June at the Oglala shootout, where two of their agents were killed. That's a big deal. That kind of, it is underplayed at that point. And, you know, FBI agents themselves have come forward and said that the continued incarceration of Leonard Peltier is a continuing FBI vendetta. And I want to back up a little bit, because I want to like just push back on the overall narrative of this film with just facts versus just, you know, I can, you know, as an academic, I can make sort of theoretical arguments about the structure of the repressive state, you know, and what it does to social movements. But I think just looking at the facts here, especially in the lead up to Anna Mae Aquash's murder in December of 1975, is incredibly important. So we have the shootout in June. Anna Mae actually comes back to the reservation looking to meet up with Leonard Peltier. Now, why would that make sense if this man held a gun to her head and said, "Are you an FBI informant?" Why would she want to meet up with him? Well, it's because, according to Peltier and Bob Robidoux, who was a co-defendant of Leonard Peltier, Anna Mae Aquash was sort of taken under the wing of Peltier's outfit for protection, right? And there's even a dispute about that incident where he allegedly had interrogated her at gunpoint.
Because it's only her word we get, right? I mean, they were the only
Exactly.
two people there, right? So there's no right. Sorry, yeah.
And I don't want to say too much about that, other than to say that I know from talking to folks that it didn't go down like that. You know, Leonard and Anna Mae were friends, and he wouldn't do that. Let's just say that. But let's say that story, to kind of quell, you know, these suspicions, might sound better if she said, you know, if it looked like that she was held at the point of a gun. Let's just say that. That's what was insinuated. It was something that was made up. And then it gets used against him later on, right? So he takes her under his outfit, and he's with Dino Butler, Bob Robidoux. That's those are his co-defendants. Those are Leonard Peltier's co-defendants in the shootout. And so if this man had just threatened her life, why would she risk everything to go meet up with him? Especially when he's so hot at that moment, you know, when the entire FBI is looking for him, right? That doesn't make any sense. And then, when she is, you know, when she does meet up with him and they're on that Oregon thing, like it doesn't make sense that even after she's arrested in Oregon in 1975 and extradited back to South Dakota, that she's going to be like, hey, you know what a really great idea would be is to abscond, you know, go on the run, be a fugitive, and then go meet back up with this guy and try to meet up with Dennis Banks. That doesn't make does that sound like somebody who was fearful of their life, of the people who were surrounding them? To me, that sounds like you're just walking into the fire, you know. And I don't think she was that stupid, you know, to do those things. But there's this, you know, she goes to Denver. This did happen. You know, she goes to Denver in November of 1975. And there you do have Theda Clark. You do have the other two people, Arlo Looking Cloud and John Boy Graham, who are there. They've all admitted to being there. It's in some capacity. So they go there, and Theda Clark is the one who begins to interrogate her. She's the one who actually first accused her in the Farmington Convention previously that year. And they have this kind of bogus document that says, you know, informant A and B, you know, that's why they were stopped in Oregon, and this is the reason why she's either informant A or B, and that's why they got stopped in Oregon. Well, according to FBI documents, they've been following them the entire time. And I don't think anyone in that group was an informant. I just think that they had intelligence. I mean, they're driving around in Marlo Brandon's mobile home, Marlo Brando's mobile home.
Marlon Brando, yeah.
That's not inconspicuous. So anyways, she's there being interrogated in Denver, and then it's Theta's. There's this phone call. There's all this stuff that happens. Like let's bring her to Rapid City. So they bring her to Rapid City, and from my accounts, from what I understand, this did happen. She was brought into the Wickeldock office, and they did ask her, but from what I was told, they were just like, get out of here. Why is you as a fugitive coming to the defense attorney's offices, like the AIM house? That puts everybody in jeopardy. And so people were angry that she had showed up. Like from the people I spoke, they were angry that she had showed up because it's like, this house is being surveilled, and so she does leave. What happens after that is she gets murdered. But the crucial point here is that in December 1975, December 19th to be precise, an FBI informant in Denver notifies his handler in what are called these 302 reports that Anime Aquash was murdered the week prior after being held in Denver, and she was murdered by Theta Clark, John Boy Graham, and Arlo Looking Cloud. That doesn't come up in the documentary at all. I'm not some kind of like genius researcher, I got this secret FBI document. This has been out in the public since at least 2011 that this was known. But this FBI informant lets the FBI know this person was killed. This is who did it. This is when it happened. So why did it take until February of the next, or actually March of the next year, so December to March, for them to identify the body? And when they showed up on scene, I thought that was a masterful reconstruction, just a pure fabrication. When they showed up and they were like, oh, it's, we found this person who was thrown off on the side of the road. And it was just, it was just exposure. If it was just an exposure death, if it was just another dead Indian, is basically what they were trying to say. Then why would David Price, why would Bob Ecafee, why would all of these agencies be out on that scene? Right. And remember, David Price even admits in that interview that he said, yeah, I was looking for her. So he knew what she looked like. He had a profile. You even look at the description of his FBI reports of what Anime Aquash looked like, and it noted, it detailed her jewelry, and that jewelry that is a key piece throughout the entire film. And he couldn't identify her at the crime scene. And then they put her off, Oh, go ahead.
Well, I just want to clarify, because in the documentary, in the series, we're shown Looking Cloud, Theta, and the third, I forget the third,
John Graham.
Theta and John Graham. They are all named, identified as having likely been the killers.
Exactly.
Theta, I think, is she herself killed, or
no,
she's never charged? I can't remember what the text said, but I just want you to clarify that that we're shown that they're the alleged killers, but we're never shown this point that you're making about the FBI document revealing the names months earlier, and that the FBI, as I'm hearing your point, the FBI is the source for the claim that these are the killers.
Yeah.
Am I hearing
you?
Yeah. Okay.
That's correct.
Okay.
This informant, who actually the informant was actually the intimate partner of the person whose house they were being held at in Denver. I think that's important to point out. And I also think it's important to point out that the theory of the case is that it wasn't just Theta Clark who, got a hair up her butt and decided to kill this person. It was an orchestrated conspiracy by AIM leadership to have her assassinated.
That's right.
That's the theory of the case, right?
And then we're shown all of the AIM leadership: Russell Means, Dennis Banks, John Trudell, Belcourt. They're all either I don't know, or that one did it, or they might have been involved. Or I don't, it was a whole bunch of finger pointing or non-acceptance of involvement. Just okay. Sorry. Thank you. Go ahead.
Yeah. So they're at this crime scene. And it's important. David Price in that film actually says, like, yeah, he knew what he looked like, but he didn't know what she looked like then, or didn't question, like, what were the circumstances of this. I mean, there was a lot of decomposition of her body at that time, but at the same time, they had that pathologist who kind of declared that she was just a Jane Doe, and she was that she had died of exposure, and she's probably like drunk or whatever. It was a very racist thing, and so it was the family who demanded that there be an exhumation and then another autopsy done. And that's when this guy from Minneapolis goes down and he finds that there was a bullet in her head, a .32 caliber bullet. And so that's the kind of the story, right? And then after that, the case goes cold until the 90s, right? And this mysterious box of this is, I don't know if they played this up in the film, but in the trailer they were like, if you watch the trailer to this film, a mysterious box arrives at the producers' homes, and it contains all these FBI recordings. Well, those FBI recordings are from a paid FBI informant, Kamuk Nichols, who was formerly married to Dennis Banks. His wife turns FBI informant. What is not mentioned in the documentary, and this might be shocking to you, Jared, is that Kamuk actually, during the course of the trial and investigations, becomes intimate with Bob McAfee, the lead investigator, and then marries him in the midst of the trial. So she can't testify against him, and he can't testify against her. That seems like a crucial element, to just kind of gloss over. Oh, by the way, the lead informant, the main informant, the key witness, is married to the key investigator.
Why they always skip over the messy stuff? That's the good part.
Yeah. They should have done a whole series just on that. Right. Yeah. No.
Because I need them to include the messiness with the revolutionary stories. I need to know that they're well-rounded. They had the tea, they had a roster, they was doing a lot, they had 3 divorces. We need to know all of it.
but sort of to Amber's point, the tea that they do share in the documentary is meant to further the narrative they want to tell. So they do get into anime had relationships with this one, with that one. So and so was mad that her ex was mad that she moved on to Dennis Banks. That was there was some of that in there, but it's all sort of to push the narrative that basically AIM and the Native community is a mess, and has nothing to do with the context of what the state has been doing. It's just, these folks are a mess. The FBI is doing the best they can, with the help of these good informants and firsts to prosecute and all this, So yeah, but that would have been an interesting detail to include if they were wanting any sort of honesty. Yeah. All right.
So in the course of the trials, I mean, it's important to point out that there was no physical evidence that tied any of these people to the actual murder. It was all just he said, she said kind of thing. And the main she said was Kamuk testifying against her former comrades and, her former husband. Which seemed, that's a huge betrayal, I think. And I think that really blew people's mind at that time. And I think Leonard Peltier even said it's like getting stabbed in the heart, and it's also, I think, just to point out that, to refocus a little bit. So Theda Clark is the main conspirator, according to this, the state's theory of the case. But they spend the state and these documentary filmmakers spend almost no time talking about her, which I thought was kind of fascinating. It's all the men, the men who orchestrated everything, but the leadership at that time, the male leadership at that time, couldn't even be in a room together. There was so much differences and conflict among them, right? That this idea that they all sat in a room and were press the button, so to speak, to carry out this hit. This doesn't make any sense. And they would probably, if they were alive today, they would probably all say that, but
because they always trying to erase where women were in the movement, that we were actually in charge.
That's another important element here. And I think reading these documents and reading the narrative that the FBI puts out, the FBI was obsessed with the men. Like they you look at these documents. I even looked at some of the surveillance photographs. A lot of these press people that were going in, FBI, BIA would pay them for their B-rolls. And so you would get that. And that's how they would make identifications. But there were so many women there. There were so many children there. It was like, as was told to me by, Madonna Thunderhawk, AIM was a movement of families, right? It wasn't just a bunch of dudes, what is kind of portrayed in this film. It was a movement of families. But the media and the FBI chose the leadership. They chose the spokespeople. And when this crackdown happened after Wounded Knee, they weren't really interested in what the women were doing. It was completely invisible to them. So they kept the movement going. Parts of the movement did go underground, but just because, Dennis Banks was, on the run, or Leonard Peltier, or Russell Means, whoever was on the run, didn't mean that the schools shut down, that the community programs went away, that the organizing just stopped. The women just continued it. They even formed an organization called Women of All Red Nations, which was, the indigenous women's movement within the American Indian movement. They went to the United Nations in 1975. They were touring. They were going to Beirut. They were going to, Palestine. They were going to the Soviet Union in the 80s. They were connecting with the Sandinistas in the 80s. They were still a vibrant movement. But according to this narrative, they fell from grace. The men, got too drunk on their power, too obsessed with their own images, and it completely erases what comes after. So it's destroyed the legacy of the American Indian movement. It's reframed it as something that can be reduced to personalities, right? And that's the intent of, that's the effect, if not the intent of what the FBI did. Even what's also not addressed at all in this film is the brutality that the FBI went through to threaten and to coerce Native women to turn against their own people. Like Jean Roach is featured in this film, and I don't want to speak on her behalf, but she was, I trust Jean, and she was she was 14 years old at the time of the shootout in Oglala. This is her story to tell, by the way. If you ever want to have her on the podcast or your show, she would be a great person to interview. And she was 14 years old, and she refused to testify at a grand jury. She was 14 years old. They threatened her. They threatened to, threaten her mother, threaten her family. They went after a child, 14 years old. And a lot of those people at that camp at Oglala they were young people. It wasn't some the oldest people were Dino Butler, Bob Robidoux, and Leonard Peltier. The rest of them were effectively kids. And so they paint them off as this militant revolutionary organization, blah, 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 but they're really just attacking kids. And so what does that say about the FBI? And Myrtle Poorbear, this woman who had severe mental health issues, they threatened to take away her children. David Price, the guy who was featured in this film, threatened to take away her children, coerced her to testify, against key AIM leadership, to testify against, Leonard Peltier. She later retracted that, but that was after the immense amount of threats that they put on her, threatened to kill her. They even, according to her, showed her photos of Anime Aquash's dead body and said, this could happen to you if you don't cooperate. And so somehow these people, there's this other element here there's two things that I know we're running out of time, but there's two elements that I want to talk about. One is the very plausible reality that Theda Clark was an FBI informant. And the second one is to talk about this idea of murdered missing Indigenous women, this movement that has sprung up. And it really kind of launched as a campaign in the 90s, around the time this investigation was restarted and reignited, and how the murder of Anime Aquash has been taken up by the FBI. The FBI, the very perpetrators of violence against Indigenous women at this time, are now the arbiters of justice for these women. And to go back to Pine Ridge, the Pine Ridge reservation, the Oglala Sioux tribe sued the FBI recently, sued the Department of Justice, because there were so many unsolved murders, unsolved rapes, unsolved cases of violence against Indigenous women, because even though there was a large influx of federal dollars for policing, these crimes were not being solved. So it begs the question, what is the purpose of the FBI in this scenario? According to our jurisdiction as Indian reservations, they're considered federal jurisdiction. So the FBI has supreme jurisdiction. They're the ones who are in charge of investigating major crimes such as murder and rape. But what we've seen them do is just become essentially a colonial police force that is meant to destroy our political movements. They've attempted to destroy the American Indian movement. Last thing I want to say, if there are any more questions, is that there have been credible accusations from leaders themselves, people who are not in this film, people who are on the ground. There's a man named Ernesto Vigil. He was a Chicano organizer in Denver at the time. I listened to a podcast he did with just randomly. He was part of the Crusade for Justice, and he kind of laid out the details of the case. And at that time, I was researching the details of the case, and he plugged in some key questions that I had that just didn't add up, because I was sitting there holding this FBI document that said they knew who killed her in December 1975. Like, why is it not coming out until the 90s and the early 2000s that people get charged? And why is the person who's named in this document, or according to the state's theory of the case, the main perpetrator, never brought to trial? Why is there no focus on this? Those are like legitimate questions, that haven't been answered. This film does not answer those questions. And in fact, it obscures them. It doesn't even get into the other witnesses who became the key informants for the FBI. Cyril Chapman, who was a British national. He was in the, he was like aligned with the American Indian movement. He wrote several books. One was forwarded by Bill Clinton, the president. And it turns out he was a pretendian. He was pretending to be native at that time, a British national. I don't know, this is, again, the media and the state tends to pick our leadership. That doesn't come internally from us as much as your all fault as it is ours. But he becomes this person who starts writing the official book on the American Indian movement. And he starts going around in the 90s interviewing all these people. And he becomes a paid FBI informant. He gets what's called an S visa, a special visa, which is also known as a snitch visa, to become a key witness. He turns hundreds of thousands of dollars. He's being paid. He's later outed. He's reinvented himself. His name is like Rain Bear, I think. He recently did a documentary on MMIW. He met President Biden. It's wild how these people just completely reinvent themselves, and there's no accountability. There's no memory of this, but his testimony becomes the sort of key documents, and he basically becomes a DOJ informant or FBI informant because he gets a special visa to stay in the United States, an S visa, which is also known as a snitch visa. This is all public documents. I'm not like revealing any hard secrets here. This is something that anyone can go online and find. So he's another individual, and I bring him up because you have Kamook Nichols and Cyril Chapman, who are the key state witnesses against, the American Indian movement. That's where they're resting their credibility on their theory of the case of these two key witnesses. And at that time there was a lot of things happening, but I would say that I don't know today if they could do what they did back then. But nonetheless, it set a narrative that is hard to disrupt. We did an episode on this allegation and this myth that Leonard Peltier had something to do with Anime Aquash's murder. Check it out on our platform, the Red Nation podcast, because we knew this film was coming out. We knew the executive producers on it. None of them are native. There was a different contentious history about how the film came about. I don't want to get into it now, but a lot of people I knew were really uncomfortable with even being interviewed by these filmmakers, even though the director herself is from our nation. She's Lakota, Yvonne Russo, because Cyril Chapman, said he was just, doing a book on the American Indian movement. Turns out that he's an FBI informant, but also the loaded nature in which, you're entering into a snake pit, essentially, when you agree to do these things. And we don't have control over the narrative.
Let me jump in. And you kind of said you didn't want to get too much into it, so I just want to get a little bit into it. I'm always interested in the why nows. So for like a documentary like this, in terms of sort of the continued battering of the AIM legacy, why do you think? Obviously, it's informally or formally an FBI production. But why now at this particular stage do you think this is being put out there the way it's being put out there, casting people as heroes and villains, and obviously portraying the law enforcement, particularly the FBI, as the heroes of the story, solving cases and so forth and so on?
I don't know the intent, but I can know that there's correlative kind of occurrences. One is the fact that Leonard Peltier is coming up for clemency. It tends to happen. I mean, at his last BOP hearing, Bureau of Prisons hearing for his parole, this was actually brought up. This accusation that he had something to do with the murder is completely bogus. And this was brought up in 2011 at the same, parole hearing that he had. There's that. There's also a really powerful growing movement that of Lakota people for land back. There's been a growing movement in the Black Hills and where I'm from around this. And what better way to delegitimize the legacy of that movement, to say you have no heroes, you have no, you have no ground. All your heroes are tarnished, they're murderers. And the effect of this is it's like kind of watching just like an old Western film in many ways. It's like the landscape, our issues as Lakota people become the background for this character, Anime Aquash and her murder. And then, the subsequent police who come in. We become the jealous type. We become the killers. We become the conspirators. That's the way it comes off. And a lot of people talked about that. My friends and family from back home, they're like, "Wow, this really portrays Lakota people in a really bad light." And so there's that kind of effect of it. It's like it's delegitimizing us. Like how can you take any of these people seriously? Because you can trace all their links back to this discredited, misogynist, murderous, homicidal movement, right? And it's also like it prevents us from even having a solid grasp on our history, right? And this is something as an academic that I'm really perplexed by. That the way, I mean, I know the PMC, professional managerial class. I know that in many ways Native people are, or not Native people, but academics are sort of tools of empire. They get inscripted into this, but it's strange to me how. It's not strange, but it's always surprising to me how this critical thinking faculty can be turned off when we say, the leadership is misogynist, because then it reduces everything that AIM did. And a lot of the people they interviewed who were making these accusations were not even part of the movement. Some of them, Joy Harjo is the poet laureate, was the poet laureate of the United States. And she's making some pretty heavy accusations against the American Indian movement. And that might have to do with the fact that she knowingly crossed the BDS picket line. She's been called out by Native activists left and right for her Zionist tendencies. And AIM was anti-Zionist. AIM was anti-imperialist. They
left that out of her lower third, by the way, when you watch the film.
So I wanted to lemon pepper cauliflower back off of Kamal, but So we talked about this before with Jared and a few other people in terms of how once something get popular, the film industry comes and like make sure that you look at it this way. And I don't know if it's like FBI, CIA doing it, or the creatives are seeing something popular happen and they're like, "Oh, I should probably tell a story and try to sell it." But what I was looking at was this this thing that was published in 2018, and you see a supposedly former supporter of Leonard Peltier now saying why I no longer support him, and then it goes into like the conversation around being more lenient or being in more support of Annie Mae's family. But then there's some comment down here that I wonder if any of these have accuracy. But this person was the only person who was kind of like, all right, this letter is bullshit, and then they went into like why it was false. But I wonder if this lady has something to do with it, or were there like very popular people who also was kind of flipping with Leonard Peltier that probably helped with this film. I haven't seen the film yet. I'm gonna watch it now, but I wonder if you can get into like maybe some of the people behind it.
Some of the people behind the film, yeah. I mean, according to like Paul Demain, who's the main journalist, which by the way, I have this. I don't know if I brought this book, but these cops, they know. I mean, to the credit of publisher and corporate publishers, these publishers don't want to publish these police books, but I find them because they self-publish them on Amazon. Don't pick this up. Don't read this book. But this is Abe Alonso's, like, basically his case files. It's this total like narcissistic, self-aggrandizing thing, and in this, he admits that he and Paul Demain were working hand in hand. So you have a journalist, a native journalist, who's completely, discredit. I mean, we make this comment all the time, like, oh, journalists, are just the stenographers of empire. But it's like literally in here. It's in this book, and it's in this book, which is written by Joe Trimbach, which is the American Indian Mafia. And all you have to do is just look at who blurbed the book. You have Oliver North. And Paul Demain. And it says in here that the Richard Tuwelk, who is also featured in the film, wrote the introduction to this book. So these are the characters who are considered the experts. Richard Tuwelk in this film, he's also one of those people, as you said, Geechee, that who was like, I'm an AIM diehard. And then like after Anime, I came to God, like I felt like this was something that I couldn't stand for anymore. And so then he becomes a sellout. He becomes an informant, essentially. That's a kind of like the narrative that they also, it's kind of in the film. Paul Demain kind of does this with Arlo, or excuse me, Richard Tuwelk does this with Arlo to say like he was the only person who has any kind of redemptive capacity, or it should be redeemed, because he was the one who came forward. He stepped forward and said, I was one of her killers. And it's sad because, it portrays this thing where it's like, all of a sudden, there's these people who turn, like this person you're talking about on here, and their stories become centered, right? Never the people who were there, the people who were actually there, who witnessed this thing happen in real time, are still alive. I've interviewed many of them, and they've told me, I've tried to talk to people about this, but nobody will listen. They're not the stories that people want to hear. These are from people, like this. The sad thing about the AIM legacy and the industry around the Red Power movement is that it's also kind of created a bubble about who was actually involved. And many of the people that I've interviewed, just sort of foot soldiers of AIM, whether they're men, women, children, they have a much different story to tell, and how things went down. And those stories, like what you're pointing out, those stories make great headlines and clickbait. And if you only have to look during the time of the trials to see a lot of these think pieces out. Paul Demain wrote this whole thing about why I no longer, that was his kind of story arc too. He's like, I was, once a supporter of Leonard Peltier, and now I can no longer support him because of what I know. Leonard Peltier actually sued Paul Demain and said, it's liable for you to make an accusation that I had something to do with the murder of Anna Mae Aquash. And guess what? He won that libel suit. So it's a libelous claim, according to even this colonial court system to even make that accusation, right? But Leonard Peltier doesn't have the resources, nor the time, nor the will to go around just suing people, making these accusations.
But then once that's done legally, then how could the documentary get away legally without including reference to that as they're allowing accusations of him to go off? By the way, to your previous point about who's still here, I said the same thing as I'm watching on the at one point they make reference to this, and then the text on the screen says something to the effect, by such and such a date, all of these leaders from AIM have died.
Mm-hmm.
Trudell, Bellancourt, Means, and I'm like, Leonard's still here. I was like, you name checked him, you drag his ass in the documentary for 5 good minutes. He's still here. You could have, but they so they don't do that. Then they also don't make reference to what you just said about this libelous case. So it brings me back to that initial question. Then how would they even? I mean, I get it. I get it. But legally speaking, there should have been some question about that inclusion in the documentary. If they don't even make reference to the fact that he's won a case on this claim. But yeah, I know.
I mean, he's a man in prison who's had all his rights taken away. So what does it mean? You can just dump more shit on? Excuse my language, but you can just dump more shit on him.
Yeah.
You can cuss. Kamal's kid is gone now.
Yeah, Kamal took his kids. Yeah, Kamal left with the baby. So, listen, I know we're relatively speaking, technically we're out of time. But although there's no official rule here about that, but to just be mindful of your time and everyone else's, I'll at least give you a chance to if there's any pressing questions from my comrades on screen, or if there's anything you wanted to make sure you left us with before we officially wrap. And then hopefully we can do many more of these, and we'll definitely be encouraging, to the extent we haven't already, folks to check into your podcast and other work. I'm currently still myself reading, your Red Nation Rising book. So there's, I'd like to, I'm sure, we would all like to continue this engagement, but yeah, let me turn it over to any of you for anything, really. Yeah.
Comment about the women in movement piece, because I do think it's really important. And I also struggle with the idea that maybe it's better for them not to know certain women are running things so that they can, lead it for such a long time. But there was a really good parallel in the Say Nothing documentary on Hulu about the IRA that heavily focused on the men too. And they were using women for like strategy and policy stuff and figuring out stuff in the background, but no one ever suspected them of anything because they were always focused on the men.
Say Nothing is great. I don't know. I can't vouch for its history. I don't know the history well enough to vouch for it, but I will say the series was great, and the questions and topics, even to Amber's point there, that you're invited to consider as a viewer is just delicious. So I would recommend you take some time and then maybe we could, do a part 2 with a comparison discussion.
I did fact check a lot of the stuff. It took me a very long time to watch it because I tend to stop watching stuff. So I would stop it and like look up all the stuff about what they were saying. They really did call them the Sisters of Terror. They really did do all those things, like the hunger strike. They did all of that. And I think that there's just so much to learn about this type of movement, like the way that literally no one ever would say anything, and they were able to go for so long without them even knowing what they looked like. Like that's a real, actual, powerful movement that we don't have the type of like dedication to currently. Mainly because everybody want to be a celebrity activist on Instagram. So
that's Go ahead, Nick.
Any other questions? Well, I just wanted to say, like, this is something that I didn't want to do. I never wanted to. I'm being honest. I never wanted to do this work. I've had conversations with people who have lied to me, before I've even, started doing this research. I as a historian, as somebody who's like kind of specializes in oral histories, I want to talk to people first, because I think that people are saying, "Oh, memory's bad, blah 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 blah," but I actually want to know how they understand the story, like how it went down. And it was mind blowing to me by people who even, who were telling the truth, as far as I can tell, their truth, and also people who are just explicitly lying to me, that nobody really just sat down and talked to some of these folks, to get their perspectives. And this isn't something that's like, there's somebody be like, oh, you're trying to exonerate AIM. And I'm not trying to exonerate AIM. Like, I that's not my goal. Like, as a researcher, my goal is to, somebody who's also been trained in journalism, is to get the facts. And the facts are just fundamentally wrong here. And as somebody who, we enter into this new phase of, we saw the Standing Rock protests happen, right? And the level of FBI involvement in that movement has not been fully accounted for. The level of FBI involvement, one of the first things that these private military firms were concerned about was the Standing Rock movement's international connections. Its connections to Black Lives Matter, its connections to the Palestine movement. These are all in the documents. They want us to be domesticated, isolated, narrowly focused in our movements, and we've never been narrowly focused in our movements. Even the water protector movement, as we know it today, they were talking about Venezuela and sanctions on Venezuela as related to the expansion of U.S. fossil fuel infrastructure to choke out the largest oil reserves in Venezuela, to destroy their government. And like, we recognize Hugo Chavez as somebody who came in and gave us heating assistance, when nobody else cared. Like, we live in some of the poorest places. I was a beneficiary of that. And that, you can say whatever you want, but that, at the end of the day, you can't eat ideology, and at the end of the day, what warms your house, and this narrative around the FBI and these state forces are trying to destroy the very things that have given us hope, that have moved history forward, that have provided opportunities and possibilities for us to kind of break these chains and these shackles and these things that have confined us. But for some reason, as somebody who's been involved in the movement, like, I think I take, and I was reading some of Jared's work actually, and before he came on the show, and it's like, this project, the decolonization, like, I think it becomes like a buzzword, right? There's probably a documentary on that now that's like all like, about self-healing and stuff like that. But our minds are so colonized to the point that we can't actually imagine something, in the past or in the present or in the future that is outside of these conditions, right? And I think that's incredibly powerful, to the point we're believing the FBI, that we've internalized that narrative about ourselves, that we are misogynist, that we are killers, that are here, like, that we cannot have heroes. We cannot have a revolutionary past or a revolutionary present or a revolutionary future. And to me, that's the first thing. That's what colonization is about. It's not just about colonizing the land. It's about taking away the sense of a future, right? And how do you do that? You destroy the past. And I think that's what this documentary does. It's the effect. It may not be the intention, but it's the effect of it. It completely obscures and obfuscates the very issues that the people at that time period were fighting for. It even distorts the figure of Anna Mae Aquash. She was somebody who's ride or die AIM at the end of the day. And we talk about this in the podcast episode we did, and everyone I've talked to had immense amount of respect for her as somebody who was, who was diehard, who would give her life. And it's sad to me. It's really sad for her children. I feel for them. Like, I don't know what it's like to grow up that way, but the person that they're trying to honor in that film is not the person who she actually was. She was.
Sorry, no, go ahead. Finish. Sorry.
No. And I'll just quote Hank Adams, who is somebody, he's an interesting figure at that time period. He was not entirely 100% AIM, but he was down for the Red Power movement. He was militant in his own ways, had his own faults, but he said Anna Mae's ways were AIM's ways, good or bad. And he's somebody who knew her. And I think we have to wrestle with that fact. You can't like just refashion her as some kind of martyr at the end of the day. You can't refashion her as somebody who was the victim of the very people who she was laying down her life for, right? because that's not what happened.
So that, again, that's a powerful point that you're making there. Well, several of them, but one. So I just want to. So how would you recommend that those of us less familiar with these issues and these people view her and then AIM? Are you so the claim that she? Yeah. What is your theory of what happened then? And or how we or maybe the best way to approach what happened in her case, because that's a very interesting point that you're making there about how she should or should not be remembered and what this film is or is not doing.
Mm-hmm. I think just based on what I know and what people have told me and the evidence that I have seen, I do think that Theda Clark was the person who killed her. But I also think Theda Clark was somebody who was deeply troubled because she herself was an FBI informant. According to the sources that I have, and I don't make that claim lightly. It's something that I don't, it's not to say like, oh, there's like FBI informants everywhere, but they did have sources, and even in these books, they are talking to people who are AIM members who are just giving over information. They're becoming informants for the state, whether they are willingly, knowingly doing that. That's what happens when you talk to the police. You just become an informant of the state. And in the course of
there's something happening with your mic. I think, is that his mic that's doing this?
Is it cracking?
Okay, yeah, it's cracking. Sorry, it just got really bad there for a second. That's much.
How about
better
now?
Oh,
Okay.
Perfect. Yeah.
So they became like a lot of people were just doing these, there was no like, hey, I'm not going to talk to the cops kind of thing. And so you kind of get a lot of this information based on these interviews that they have done, but also people begin to change their stories because now they're implicated. Now they become sort of coerced into becoming key witnesses of the state. And then out of it, they craft this narrative that we've already covered. But at the end of the day, I think it was I don't think it was a planned out decision. I think it was a hasty decision that they made, that Theda Clark had made to kill her. And I think she was trying to get the legitimacy of people to buy on to this thing. People were just like completely like, what the F is going on here? And that's what a lot of people say. Like, I had no idea that this was going to lead to this. But at the end of the day, like, think about it. The FBI was supposed to undergo reforms in the 1970s after Hoover, right? Especially around the way they handled informants. But yet we have people like James Whitey Bulger, who's out there murdering people as an FBI informant, like probably hundreds of people. You have Greg Scarpa Sr., right? All recruited at the top echelons, right? And there's no accountability within the FBI, right? There's no accountability in terms of like murderers as informants. And what does it mean? There's no statute of limitations on murder. But why did they wait 30 years? Why did they wait 30 years? It's enough kind of like mental break in time to say like, well, nobody's going to look at the FBI. But the DOJ, in one of its own admissions in the 90s, stated very clearly one of the reasons why they didn't want to prosecute these individuals is, one, there's no material evidence, but also it lends legitimacy that this was an FBI cover-up. And from what I can tell, it actually was an FBI cover-up. I mean, looking at even the way they described Anna Mae in 1976 in these FBI documents, a year after her body was found and identified, they keep talking about her as an unidentified Indian female. They keep referring to her as unidentified girl, unidentified female Indian, unidentified victim. So, they still hadn't, come to terms with like, she's identified, this is a person who murdered her. So I think it's that, like, at the end of the day, it's like, it's easier to just say, we didn't know what happened. Let's let these investigators, these hard-nosed investigators, Abe Alonzo and Bob Ekefee, solve the case that we refuse to do anything about from the very beginning.
Nick Estes, thank you very much. It's been great. from the homework assignment to the analysis to the discussion. It's been great. And like I said, I look forward to doing much more. Thank you very much for joining us this morning.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
No, anytime. And
you a historian. You was doing there, your big one. I said you better give us all the facts, line it up in a timeline.
Oh, I just scratched the surface, and I texted Jared a little bit about this. But if you ever want to go a little bit deeper, it's not putting the tinfoil hat on. A lot of this is what I'm saying, y'all. A lot of this research is out in the public. I'm not doing anything. I'm not like drawing this big, point A, point B. This is I'm using what the state has said about itself and what it knew. I'm not like revealing any secrets. I'm just saying, like, I'm using the documents are coming. I'm not even like weighing in on what people have told me. I'm just like using, this is what the state said. This is what they knew. And what they knew doesn't line up with what happened.
Do you go in more detail on your podcast about these episodes?
We do. So yeah. And I think we want to do another one based on it's just going to be called like Pretendian Informants, because there's a phenomenon of mostly non-native folks claiming to be native, infiltrating movements, going back to the AIM days. Like Doug Durham was a white guy who claimed to be native. We have the case of Cyril Chapman. I'm probably going to do a podcast episode on him because his impact on the movement at that time period was pretty fascinating. His connections are interesting as well. He's still around. He's still making documentaries. He's rebranded himself.
But he was an informant too, right?
Oh yeah, definitely. Yep. And it's outed in the court. It's not like I'm making that speculation. He's the lawyers, the defense attorneys for Richard Marshall, Dick Marshall, who was one of the people who were indicted but was found not guilty, kind of exposed this.
Okay, but yeah, I'm gonna look it up on the podcast.
So I saw the one you did on anime. I didn't know you did more on the series itself.
Oh
so
no, my plan is to do another another episode. Yeah. Probably won't happen until after the new year, but I just want to say one last thing. There's a lot of things happening right now with the FBI. It's on the back foot. Trump is coming to power and claiming to, he's going to, Chris Wray is stepping down, but it's also at this moment, we see Biden pardoning his son. And then also, I think he granted clemency to I think it was like 1,500 people.
Mm-hmm.
Well,
he pardoned 1,500, 39 got clean, right?
Yeah. And so the political winds are shifting in favor of Leonard Peltier's clemency right now, and want people to kind of be aware of that. And that's not because of insider dealing at the White House. That's because everyday grassroots people have kept that campaign and that truth alive. At the end of the day, you go to Oglala, everyone knows who Leonard Peltier is. Everyone knows who Anna Mae was. They loved her. She was considered part of the community there. This is something it's almost as if it happened yesterday for them. It's still embedded in that base of support, that grassroots base of support. And at the end of the day, that's all that really matters. Whatever victory or whatever, people claim, these policy shifts, it happens because everyday people have struggled, laid down their lives, sat in prison, and sacrificed for the freedom of our people.
Right on. Thank you very much. We'll make sure the link to the podcast is in the show description and invite people to check it out. And Nick, thank you very much. Looking forward to talking with you again.
Right on.
Good care. All right. Peace. Big shout out to Nick Estes for coming through. Definitely encourage people to check out his podcast and his books if you haven't already. And to the extent you want to watch some disturbing approaches and framing in history, watch that series and see what we were talking about. Good people. Anything before we get out of here? It's been fun. It's been fun. What's up?
It's been a great time. I mean, you're welcome for helping you bring your show numbers up.
She did bring the crowd.
Thank you, Amber, for bringing the crowd and the energy. No doubt. Anytime, please come back any Friday for sure.
I got you on Monday if I wake up.
So,
or whatever day.
Well, technically,
Wait, y'all don't have a
technically,
show on Mondays. It's on Tuesdays.
technically, it's my show on Mondays, and I would invite you this coming Monday, but we got something special happening on dialectical materialism and atheism. If you want to join us, come through. Well, I'm mashing it together based, and Josh Ingram's going to be featured on that one. But if you want, you would be welcome to join us. Any of you, either of you would be welcome to join us.
I have interesting viewpoints about atheism, so I don't. If I wake up, I don't mind. But the issue is that I'm in a different time zone, and this show be early as hell for me.
Yeah. So in any other time, and tonight, if folks, I think is We Are Darker Than Blue going to be on tonight? I can't remember the schedule now. But if either after whatever's happening later tonight, Darker Than Blue, anything else, after you finish with that, you can come on over to my channel where we're having another roundtable with the football crew, football fights and colonialism. Tomorrow back here with Saturdays with Renee. Geechee, you joining us tomorrow? You with us tomorrow?
No. No, I'm gonna miss that one.
What y'all talking about tomorrow?
What are we talking about tomorrow? Is Renee still in the chat?
Y'all have a guest coming from I forgot. One of her guest people are on the continent.
Oh, really? Yeah, I got to get caught up.
Like in Africa?
Mm-hmm.
That's so cool.
Oh, really?
I'm going to Africa like in a week.
I thought that's what she said.
Yeah, I got to double check. I got to check in with the boss and find out what's happening.
Brother said he finna try one of my flirtations on his wife tonight.
Oh yeah.
I think you need to give us a second one. You should end the show.
Okay, I do have a theoretical question though. If you wear matching Christmas pajamas with somebody, does that mean it's serious?
For me, it would have to be.
Wait. No. Where were y'all at though?
I mean, I ain't did it yet.
Where would the people be at? What's the scene?
Like if you went to a little ugly Christmas sweater party, y'all had matching sweaters. I don't feel like that means you're in a serious committed relationship. I think that means that y'all was, playing into the theme.
Yeah. I don't think. I think everybody else gonna walk away with like they serious.
My friend was like, "Oh, are you gonna wear matching Christmas pajamas with somebody?" Because somebody asked me about it, and I was like, "Yeah, probably." And they was like, "That's a big deal." I was like, "That is not a big deal."
I think you might get some responses you might not be ready for, or who might be confused. You might need to clarify a couple of things. You might need
me wearing the pajamas and y'all seeing me wearing the pajamas are two totally different things. You're being real.
Okay, I think I follow that. Okay.
Just because I wore them don't mean nobody saw that I was wearing them. Denzel, shut up. He said they go together. That is hilarious.
They go together. That's what it means.
I think if you wear a sweater at a little party with somebody, that means you just went on a little date to an ugly Christmas sweater party.
No, because
you don't match. You don't coordinate like.
Yeah, and when you're not together, you show up. Somebody got to change. Somebody got to that's if you stay in the same outfit, it's conveying.
Maybe it's because I don't think of stuff as seriously as that. Because I was like, it's just a little date. Like I'm just asking.
Little date and matching that don't go together.
They was like, you want to go to this Christmas sweater party and we can wear matching sweaters. I'm down to do it. I said, oh, okay. I didn't think it's that big of a deal. But my friend was like, it's definitely a big deal. I didn't think that. I mean, I feel like
they might be
outfits for dates all the time.
You know what that sound like? It sounded like you was going to, or that person was going to present in front of their family members, like, yo, I need you to act like my partner, and we could even dress it. That's what it looked like.
That's what I'm saying. You're going to convey
party.
that.
None of his family gonna be there. I mean, it's a party. I just think this is a big deal.
Friends, family, social media, same thing.
No one's gonna see me on social media in that matching sweater.
My rules are: if we wear something that matches, we have to be together. When the sweaters are on the floor at the end of the day, we also got to be together. So
tell Leah don't do this again.
I still don't think it's a big deal.
Nah, I remember that line Common used to have. I'm not the type to match your shirt, but I am the type to match your work in a relationship. That was something he said, something like that. But
That's a
but
weird.
you are conveying next
Somebody
level.
said something about throwing on matching fits, and it's a big deal. But I think that throwing on matching fits with a fling, they're not a fling. I'm just dating multiple people, and one of the people I'm dating wants to wear matching sweaters. I don't think it's a big deal if we go to a party and we got matching sweaters on. I think it's a big deal.
Leah said, "End the show."
I wouldn't trust nothing
We've
Common
gone
says
too
because he's
far.
on his 18th girlfriend.
Don't do that. Common is common.
Geisha, you didn't see them calling you Don Cheeto
Nah.
Constant in the chat?
When I was
Common is a mess.
I've been getting
Common
Don
is-
Cheeto
yeah.
for a little while. I get Don Cheeto, get Mahershala Ali, and then I get.
I think you too dark skinned to be Don Cheeto. And I saw
Too
y'all calling me
dark-skinned.
light skin in the chat. I'm a nice mocha caramel.
Don Cheeto is dark skin.
He's darker than you though.
Oh, I don't think so.
Oh wow.
I think he's darker than you.
The
But also, I don't think you
gradations
I
are
don't think you
hilarious.
look like him for real. I think you do look like Kai Cenat though.
Well, I've
Oh,
been
man.
recently
All
hearing of Kai Cenat, Mahershala Ali, Don Cheeto, and
I could see the Ali guy. I could see that.
All right, y'all. Peace.
I'm about to
If you're
pull up.
willing to fight for it, I'm pulling the ear doctor. Thanks, everybody. Like, share, subscribe.
Let us back in.
Black Liberation.
Peace, y'all.
Let us back in.
Thanks, Amber. Thanks, Geechee. Thanks, Nick
All right,
Estes. See y'all later. Peace.